Raiders get embarrassed at home once again and drop to 2-4 on the season. So what's next? That plus a whole lot more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for October 14th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of your support, Raider Nation. Of course, the job my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we're looking good and sounding good. Definitely appreciate him. He does a fantastic job. Check him out on Twitter. You can hit him up at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And of course, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. No calls or texts coming up on today's show. Instead, I'm going to take you inside the Raiders locker room. Had the opportunity to catch up with a bunch of players following the game on Sunday, obviously the loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I had an opportunity to catch up to a few of them just one-on-one. So I'll bring you those quick one-on-one conversations with multiple players inside the Raiders locker room. That'll be coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Segment number 2, what's next? What can the Raiders do? What can Antonio Pierce do? What can they do as an organization, as a team, to get over the hump and actually have some kind of identity and become, well, a team that's actually a threat to opposing teams? That's all coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here is segment number 1, always news and notes of the day. Just kind of a recap, a quick recap of whatever happened on Sunday at Allegiant Stadium. And I say whatever because I'm still trying to wrap my finger around exactly what happened, except for I know that the Raiders lost, and it was a bad loss, 32-13. We'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'll tell you more about them later on in the show, but there it is in a nutshell. The Raiders lose 32-13. They're now 2-4 on the season, and really, and this was kind of the theme in the locker room following the game, it was the snowball effect. It was the self-inflicted wounds. It was the mistakes that the silver and black made, right? I mean, we went through the keys to victory on Friday's show, and it's funny, on my radio show on Friday, I thought, you know what, I'm making everything too complicated. For this team that clearly is not that good of a team, let's just, call a spade a spade, the keys to victory are really just getting back to basics. Tackling. They were leading the league in missed tackles. They had 68 going into Sunday's game. That can't happen. They cleaned that up a little bit. In the first half in particular, they cleaned that up. In the second half, it got away from them. Penalties, they couldn't have penalties. Well, they didn't have as many penalties, but they had some bad timing on penalties. So that was something that shot themselves in the foot. And don't turn the ball over. And guess what they did? They turned the ball over multiple times. So everything that they had to do to give themselves a chance to win, they didn't do. Right? So it's just that simple. I mean, this team has to get back to basics. It's something I talked about to Antonio Pierce last week. And again, it looked like they tried to correct it, but there's just something that's not going right with this team. And right now they're sitting there at 2-4 after the loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers Sunday at Allegiant Stadium. Aiden O'Connell gets his first start of the 2024 season. A lot of people thought that was going to make everything better. He ends up 27 for 40. 227 yards, a touchdown, and interception, but only 4 passes completed to wide receivers. Think about that. 27 passes complete. 4 went to wide receivers. They were all tight ends and running backs. We're getting all the targets. Matter of fact, a wide receiver never even got a target until late in the first half. So it wasn't the day. And of course, Brock Bowers is a glorified, he's a tight end, obviously listed as a tight end, but he's basically a wide receiver, weapon, whatever you want to call it. He had 9 catches. So there's that. That was good that they were able to get on the ball, but he still didn't have as many yards and as many big explosive plays as I thought he should have. So he had, 9 catches, about 70 something yards. But to me, it just wasn't that effective of yards. They did it okay. Got on the ball early okay, and then just kind of went away with them. There was no rhythm to the offense. That's kind of been the theme the whole season. Even in games that they've won, they've really never had a complete rhythm to their offense. I mean, the team still can't run the ball. 19 carries, 57 yards, and a fumble by Dylan Lobby. He gets into the game, has 1 carry, and it's a fumble, right? Alexander Mattison, 14 carries, 33 yards, and a touchdown. I said it earlier. Even though I know that Brock Bowers has more yards and more catches and more explosive plays than Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison has been the Raiders' most consistent offensive player all season long, which is bad to say because he's a part-time running back. You know what I mean? He's not even a guy who's on the field all the time. Obviously, Brock Bowers is doing his thing, but Alexander Mattison has been the guy that you see anytime he's near him, he's scoring. So he did that again on Sunday. But again, 14 carries, just didn't have a whole lot of touches. Seemed like they went away from him pretty early. And the wild thing about it is the Raiders on their first drive go 10 plays, 70 yards, take up over 5 minutes off the clock, score a touchdown. I'm like, wow, that's probably the best offensive drive they had all season. And then it was just bad after that and bad after that. Think about this. First drive, 10 plays, 70 yards, over 5 minutes off the clock, touchdown. Here's the rest of the half. 3 plays, 6 yards, punt. 3 plays, 9 yards, punt. 4 plays, 14 yards, fumble. 5 plays, 18 yards, halftime. All right, next half, 6 plays, 4 yards, block punt. 3 plays, 4 yards, punt. 9 plays, 69 yards, fumble. Should have been challenged because that really was a touchdown. Amir Abdullah looked like from the replay, at least where I was looking at the press box, looked like he had scored. AP doesn't challenge it. They actually go hurry up, and Amir Abdullah fumbles it on the very next play. 3 plays, 9 yards, interception. 10 plays, 70 yards, touchdown. Yay! Another 10-play drive, right? 70 yards, touchdown. Great. 4 plays, 5 yards, turnover on downs. That's how the Raiders' offensive approach went. And I'm really focusing in on the offense because they don't have an identity offensively. And there's obviously issues defensively, too. Don't get it twisted. The defense has not been lived up to what I thought it was going to be this season. And I think a lot of us expected the defense to be really good, and it hasn't been. You know, the Steelers, for what it's worth, Justin Fields, 14 for 24, 145 yards. He was sacked 3 times. Welcome back, Divine Diablo. It was nice to see him back. He was a man. He was all over the field. He just looked like a guy that was hungry to be back on the field. But he had a sack. K'Lavon Chason had a sack, and then Crosby and Jenkins both split a sack. So 3 sacks right there for Justin Fields. Divine Diablo also had an interception that was nullified by what? Penalty, roughing the passer, right? There was a couple big plays. The Raiders that got off the field on a 3rd down, roughing the passer, back on the field. You know what I mean? Like just. Again, they only had 4 penalties for 42 yards, but they were the kind of penalties that were terrible time. Like I said, 2 personal fouls on roughing the quarterback extended the drive, right? Because one should have been an interception that Diablo had. The other one was the one that they were supposed to get off the field on 3rd down, and they didn't. There was a holding penalty on the Raiders offense on Andre James that erased a big catch that Brock Bowers had in the second half to start the first drive in the second half. Ends up going back to 1st and 20. They're not end up getting it. The punt gets blocked, right? I mean, just everything went bad. Again, only 4 penalties. You would say that's not bad, but the timing of the penalties were bad. But again, getting back to what the Steelers did, the Steelers ran for 183 yards. Najee Harris went over 100 yards, had a touchdown, pretty much went beast mode in the second half on one play to get to the end zone. And then Justin Fields almost had 60 yards rushing himself. So between those 2 guys, it was about 160 yards rushing. The Steelers ran for $183. They ran for more yards than they threw for. So, I mean, again, like I said, the defense has not been perfect, but the Raiders' offense, I mean, when the defense is good, and they did force some 3-and-outs, they did get the ball back. They did, even when they got the block punt, when the Steelers got the block punt, the Raiders held them to a field goal. Like, that was really good, but it's the offense. It's the punt, fumble, halftime, block punt, fumble, interception, touchdown, turnover on downs. Like, there's no rhythm there. No rhythm at all. So the Raiders got to figure some things out. Antonio Pierce has got to figure some things out. 6 games are in the books. The Raiders are 2-4, and it doesn't look good. The whole Allegiant Stadium was filled with Steeler fans on Sunday. The terrible towels were waving. There was plenty of yellow all over the building. On 3rd and long for the Raiders, it was super loud, right, for all the Steeler fans to get excited and fired up. I mean, it was just, it just was a trickle-down effect. Whenever the Raiders did something positive, they had a positive, so here comes some negative. And again, that was the theme that I had in the Raiders locker room following the game. Every single player, and we talked to a bunch, Max Crosby, Adam Butler, Nate Hobbs, Jack Jones, Amir Abdullah, Alexander Mattison, DJ Turner, talked to all these different players in the Raiders locker room following the game. And every single one of them, I basically hit with the snowball effect question and how do you stop that from happening? The Raiders have to figure that out. You'll hear some of that locker room sound. You'll hear some of that locker room sound coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. But coming up in segment number 2, what's next? The Raiders have already changed quarterbacks. They went from Gardner Minshew to Aiden O'Connell. So now what does Antonio Pierce do moving forward as he tries to get this team jump-started? They have 3 more games before their bye week. What can they do? How can they get things turned around before the season gets away from them? That's coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including Hims. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online. There's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in a discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. What do you got to do? Well, start right now. Your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's Hims, HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. Hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable, compounded products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. I also want to tell you about Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College, by the way, and it's funny, the first time I mentioned Hillsdale College on the podcast, I was like, man, why does Hillsdale College sound so familiar? Well, it's the home of Jared Valdir. That's the alma mater of Jared Valdir. He was a third-round pick in 2010 by the Silver and Black. He played until 2020 in the NFL, was on the Packers practice squad in 2023, but was with the Raiders from 2010 to 2013, and then he hit free agency and went to the Cardinals. So it's like, man, I was like, where do I know Hillsdale College from? That's where I know Hillsdale College from. But you can know Hillsdale College from many different places, including, well, the fact that you're just trying to get your learn on, right? Because time is our most precious commodity. You don't want to waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. So how can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, and many, many more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Right now, go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. What do the Raiders do next? And I feel like I'm almost a broken record. Last Monday, after the Raiders lost to Denver, I came on here and said, well, what's next? What do the Raiders do, right? They're sitting there, obviously, at 2-3, and they've got to find something. Well, I said, okay, it's time to make a change at the quarterback position. Thought that maybe we'd find out something on Monday. We didn't find out anything on Monday. Then Antonio Pierce announced on Wednesday that, in fact, Aiden O'Connell was going to be the starting quarterback. So I feel like it's rinse and repeat. That's where we are again here on a Monday. Now what? The Raiders put up 13 points. It did not look very good. There was no rhyme or rhythm offensively. And again, I can nitpick on the defense as well. And the defense is not, they're not out of the picture here. But the offense is obviously something that has been a big problem all season long. Regardless of the wins or not that the Raiders have had, there's just been the rhyme and reason has not been there for the offense. So clearly something needs to be done. And there were some questions that were asked to Antonio Pierce in the press conference following the game on Sunday night that kind of alluded to how do you go about fixing this? How do you do, how do you get this worked out so there's some kind of rhyme or reason to what you guys are doing and aggressiveness even in the offense. And again, just focusing on the offense on today. There's multiple things that could be done. And I'm not sure what's gonna happen. And I'm not ever one that's advocating for people to lose their jobs. I hate anyone losing their jobs. These jobs are tough to get, and there's only so many of them. So I'm never going to come on here and be like, this guy needs to be fired. This guy needs to be fired. But I will say, if things keep trending like this, people will lose their jobs. Like that's the inevitable truth about the NFL, right? It's a production-based business. This is stuff that Antonio Pierce has mentioned. It's a production-based business. So ultimately you have to win. And nobody cares what you don't have. Nobody cares that you have guys that are injured. Nobody cares that your star wide receiver doesn't want to play for you anymore. Nobody cares about that. And the perfect example is the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? I mean, they haven't had some stellar quarterback play, right? Ever since Roethlisberger retired, what have they had, right? They've had Kenny Pickett. He's no longer there. He's now in Philadelphia as a backup. They got Russell Wilson. They got Justin Fields. And, they have Mason Rudolph. They haven't had, like I said, just a stellar stack of guys. They've had Mitchell Trubisky, right? I mean, none of these names are popping out at you like, whoa, that guy's the quarterback to hang their hat on. But you know what they do? They find ways to win games. So there's not going to be any, well, we can't win because of this, that, and the third. Nobody cares. Nobody. I know it sounds stupid, but nobody cares. You just have to find ways to win games. So when you're just strictly looking at the offense, and again, we'll look at the offense today, focus in on the defense later. This week's going to be a get right week, right? We're going to have to try to figure out how to get the Raiders right. You have to question the play calling of Luke Getsy. You know, and Luke Getsy was a guy that we talked about quite a bit leading into the regular season. Didn't really know who he was as an offensive coordinator in Chicago. Knew Chicago's offense didn't look very good. So, you know, we all, I believe, wondered what it was going to look like with the silver and black. How was he going to go into a situation where he has weapons and make it look right? Well, so far through 6 games, it hasn't looked right. So I asked Luke Getsy a question, and it was actually a question that was suggested to me by way of the Locked On Raiders podcast. I asked AP about Luke Getsy, I should say, when it comes to where he's calling the game from. And he's calling it from the field. And AP said that's a good question, right? He's going to call it from the field because he's always been on the field. But if things don't go right, then maybe we'll have a conversation about putting him in the booth. And the reason I bring this up first is, remember, Patrick Graham was on the sideline at first as well as the defensive coordinator. And then all of a sudden, they made the move last year to him in the booth. And I thought that was the death nail, right? I thought, okay, you move him up to the booth. That's the first step to basically him being the scapegoat and getting fired. Well, the defense just got better and better and better, and we all know how the end of the season worked. So the booth has worked really well for Patrick Graham. Maybe moving Luke Getsy to the booth so he can see the field better, see what's going on, the whole collective, the all-22 version, or basically, you know, the overhead view. Maybe that's one thing that Antonio Pierce thinks about, right? Maybe it is something that's critical. Maybe he does just fire Getsy completely. Again, I'm never going to sit here and advocate for a guy to get fired. I'm just throwing out the options out there. You could move him to the booth, see if that fixes anything. I would think that that's the natural progression. I know I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, he's fired, you got to fire him. And maybe you do. There's people in the press box that were talking about that, right? Do you think that there's going to be a firing? And I said, I don't know if there's going to be a firing, but something's going to be, you know, the scapegoat. Something's got to be, okay, this adjustment's being made. This has to be made. Already changed quarterbacks. And you know, I feel bad for Aiden O'Connell, to be honest. I mean, as much as everyone talked about him switching and he was going to be better, no Devontae, no Jacoby, right? Thayer Munford's out. No Zamir White. Not that he's been lighting it up, but he's not there. I mean, they're dealing with so many injuries, and again, nobody cares. I said that. But it's like, man, what Gardner Minshew started the season with and what Aiden O'Connell's working with is completely different. So I think that the natural progression for AP will probably be to slide Luke Getsy up into upstairs, so he can call the game from there. But it might be as extreme as fire him. That's one, you know, that's one option. And as I was talking to multiple people in the press box and we were kind of going over some options, you know, I said, all right, well, who's going to get the play calling? Maybe Edgar Bennett, right? That's a position. He's obviously been with the Raiders for a long time as the wide receivers coach, but he's also tried his hand before at play calling. Maybe it's a new voice play calling. I don't know, but it's also Luke Getsy's offense. So, you know, so who knows Luke Getsy's offense better than Luke Getsy, right? Is there anyone else that could possibly be the play caller? I don't know, right? Obviously, they were in that position last year when Josh McDaniels got fired and the OC got fired as well, Mick Lombardi, and then they went to Bo Hardegree, and he had never called plays, and all of a sudden he's thrown into the fire. So firing Luke Getsy, and I know that a lot of people want that to happen, it might be more damage doing than good. You know, they might just need to take that, like I said, take that next natural step and put him into the booth. You know, it's I feel like something's coming, though. I'm saying all this to say something's coming down the line. There's got to be some kind of adjustment because what they're doing right now ain't working, obviously. Like, I don't have to tell you that. I'm not breaking any news. There's no rhyme or reason to this offense. There's no aggressiveness when they should be aggressive. There's no tempo until like the end of the game. Then all of a sudden there's some tempo. There was moments where they could go tempo. And then when they do go fast at the end of the game, or not at the end of the game, when they go fast down there by the goal line, when Amir Abdullah got down to the 1, they should have taken their time so AP could have challenged it or at least got a better look and decided if he wanted to challenge because he probably would have won. It looked like a touchdown from the press box. So it just seems like the communication's not there. You know, the play calling, you always supposed to set up, you know, do a call and quarter one to set up the play in the fourth quarter or whatever. It's a chess match. And right now the Raiders aren't winning that chess match at all in any phase of it. They're just not. And so the offense, it needs a big time jump start. So I do expect to hear some kind of changes. As far as personnel, there's not really too much more the Raiders can do. They already changed their quarterback. AP said last week he doesn't look to, change back if there's a bad game or anything. And this is literally going to be Aiden O'Connell's job the rest of the way, unless something, terribly happens, like he stinks it up. But again, I don't even look at that game on Sunday and say, oh, that's on O'Connell. I just look at it like that. There was some bad play calling. I think it was 1st and 20. They ran the ball. 2nd 18. They ran the ball. Third and 18. Was that picked or was that a phone? Whatever play it was. That ended up being in the block punt. The 3rd and 18, I think they pick up like 8 yards or whatever. They're not able to get a first down. Then the punt comes on. It gets blocked. Again, it just doesn't seem like the play calling is where it needs to be. So I think that's going to be the first thing that is corrected somehow, some way. If it doesn't happen today, we meet with Antonio Pierce at around 11. So, of course, we'll ask him if there's any kind of changes, and he'll probably tell us that he's still reviewing the tape and he's still talking to the guys, being the coaches. But I feel like there's something has to give. It could be something that's minor, like I said, moving Luke Getsy up to the booth and see how that works, or it could be something major, like firing him all together. But something with him and the offensive play calling, I do believe has to happen, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to AP, right? I mean, look, he hired Luke Getsy, so they're gonna say, "Hey, it's on you, right? You're the guy who put all this together. You're the guy who put him in charge of the offense." So to save himself, AP's got to do something, right? Because again, if you change quarterbacks, you change coordinators, or you move your coordinator, and then you eventually fire your coordinator, guess what? All roads lead back to you at some point in the NFL. And AP's not trying to lose his job after 1 year. And I'm not saying that he's in jeopardy of losing his job, but I know a lot of people are talking about, well, this guy's in over his head. This guy didn't have any experience. He's not the right guy for the job. And you see how quickly that happens. I said on Twitter on Sunday during the game, when someone said, this is the coach you wanted, I said, yeah, it is. I'm not going to all of a sudden flip-flop and be like, no, didn't wanted Jim Harbaugh the whole time. No, I'll own it. Hey, I said that AP was the right guy for the job. Still feel like he's the right guy for the job. He's just got to be better. He's got to be better, and getting the offense figured out is one big step. The defense, that needs some work too. We'll definitely talk about the defense and all the work that it needs, because it does. It plays well, but it doesn't play well consistently through the game. It's in spurts, right? There's some really, really good moments. Then there's some really like, what was that moments when it comes to the defense. So first thing first, got to fix the offense. Something's got to happen with Luke Getsy. It's either he's going to move up to the booth, get fired, get demoted, like they did in New York with the Jets, where they just took play calling away from Nathaniel Hackett, gave it to the quarterback coach. It could be something like that, which is funny because the quarterback coach was Todd Downing, and Todd Downing is a terrible offensive coordinator, as we all know. Terrible offensive coordinator, terrible play caller. So good luck with that, Jets. We'll see that Monday Night Football, right? Bills and Jets. We'll see the first version of Todd Downing. Watch him probably go out there and look like a phenomenal play caller, but I'm not buying that. We've seen Todd Downing way too much. We know he's not good at all. So first thing first, got to fix the offense, and that's something that I'll ask Antonio Pierce myself this morning when we get to talk to him around 11 o'clock. How do you get this offense jump-started? But I think it begins with Luke Getsy, whether that's in the booth or just removing them all in all. Coming up in segment number 3, we'll go inside the Raiders locker room. Had an opportunity to catch up with a bunch of the players, but I'll just let you hear the sounds from the players that I caught up with. Had a little one-on-one action with them. That'll be next. Adam Butler, Jack Jones, and Nate Hobbs. That'll be in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about Prize Picks, which is the title sponsor of today's show, and it's also the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. You can join over 10 million users. Sign up today, and you can win up to 100 times your Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. All you got to do right now, is download the app and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. That's download the app today, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. As simple as that. prizepicks.com. Again, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to jump inside the Raiders locker room. Want to take you behind the scenes. Had an opportunity to catch up with a lot of players following the game on Sunday. And, of course, it wasn't a joyous locker room. It wasn't one where they were super excited and all wanted to hang around and talk. But to their credit, we were able to catch up with a bunch of them. So caught up with Max Crosby. We always get to talk to him. He's always, a constant. Talk to Alexander Madison. Talk to DJ Turner. Talk to Amir Abdullah. All guys that had, played roles in the game. And also I had an opportunity myself to catch up with Adam Butler, Jack Jones, and Nate Hobbs. Adam Butler has become a big-time leader on this Raiders team. He's been a vet. He's had to talk to the team multiple times, kind of give them encouragement and let them know what they need to do. He was the one that gave the big speech to the team before the Cleveland Browns game and basically let it be known, like, hey, what are you willing to do for your brother? Right, so anytime I see Adam Butler in the locker room, I always want to get an opportunity to catch up with him. Really good dude. Here's a couple minutes with Adam Butler following the game on Sunday.
Tough loss, obviously. When one play happens, one bad play, how do you guys stop it as a team from snowball effect and having another bad play happen and then another bad play?
I think it's just, attitude, which I think, most guys do have a good attitude. I didn't sense anybody that was just, dejected from the game or anything like that, but I did say it earlier in the week. When the media guys asked what we need to do to win the game, and that's just clean up the details, and minimize penalties. We can't have that, minimize missed tackles, and we just didn't do that today.
Right. It felt like the missed tackles were cleaned up, but like you guys would have a big play, then all of a sudden, like there's some penalty.
Yeah, some penalty. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
when I say details, that's what I mean. Like if you make contact with the QB, roll off. And I was guilty of that in the Browns game. I had a penalty. I'll pay my fine and move on, but I haven't done it since, and that's just something. Those are just examples of things we got to clean up.
Did it feel like that's what it was though? Every time you guys did have something that was big, a big momentum shift, like a Diablo interception, then
right, and then there's something that's stopping the momentum, because momentum is a real thing. I think that's the same thing that happened to us in the Denver game. We had momentum. One bad play, it swung the momentum to the other team. We just got to work together, and we just got to clean up that.
So how do you go about cleaning that up? You obviously are sitting at a record that you don't want. You want to be winning all the time, but how do you go about cleaning that up?
Well, I mean, if we got to work drills, then we got to work drills to focus on some of that stuff. If we got to work drills and practice rolling off the QB or keeping our head out of it, that's what we got to do. We pros, we got to be professionals about this. And take it from a professional approach.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much for your time.
Sure.
So again, like I said, it's the snowball effect, right? It's the one step forward, two step back effect. That's what the Raiders did quite a bit on Sunday, and they're just not a good enough team. They're not a good enough team to be able to overcome that. I mean, I talk about it all the time when it comes to even penalties, like a holding penalty. When they're at 1st and 20, I had Ryan Hogue, former Raider wide receiver, sitting next to me in the press box. I looked at him and said, they can't overcome that. 1st and 20, they're not going to overcome it. They're going to end up punting. And they did. They're not that good where they can do that. And ultimately, it's funny, there was a guy, Willie Ramirez, asked AP following the game, is this a good team that's making bad plays, or is this really just kind of a bad football team not playing good football? And AP said straight up, we're not playing good football. We're not playing good football. It's just not a good enough team. So they need guys like Adam Butler. They need him to step up. They need John Jacobs. Obviously, with Christian Wilkins out, you know what you're going to get from Max Crosby. But, I mean, everyone's got to step up. They've got to do their job, and they can't make mistakes. When they make mistakes, that's how the Raiders lose. So I also had an opportunity to catch up with Jack Jones. You know me, I always like to catch up with the cornerbacks, whether it's Jakorian Bennett, Jack Jones, Nate Hobbs, right? Trayvon Merrick in the back end, right? Isaiah Palomau, I should say. Any of those guys. I like to always catch up with those dudes just because, I don't know, it's easy to talk to them. So I had a quick minute. I got to catch up with Jack Jones following the game as well. Here's that conversation.
Jack, what did you see out there? It just seemed like you guys had some good plays strung together and then bad plays kind of snowballed.
I mean, it's the same thing as last week. Last week, we had too many turnovers and didn't get enough turnovers and didn't have the stops we needed. So, that led to a loss. We just got to be better as an overall offense, defense, special teams, as a collective.
Did it just feel like, though, that you guys made a big play and then, like, a penalty that could be questionable or whatever, all of a sudden just happened and just took the air out of?
Nah, yeah, for sure. We was hurting ourselves. it's like what Coach AP be telling us, you know, the Raiders can't play the Raiders, and, you know, that's exactly what happened today. We was playing against ourselves and against the officials because, you know, we was hurting ourselves. So, I mean, eventually it ended up hurting us in the long run.
How do you get back to kind of the drawing board and not play against yourselves? You know what I mean? Not do that.
I mean, that I can't answer. I mean, I just feel like everybody just got to keep playing fast, keep doing their job, try to do their job the best they can, and, you know, just move on to the next play.
Was there a certain kind of game plan that you guys approached defensively when you had, like, JB coming in and out and nickel? And was that something that you saw specifically from the Steelers that you thought you could take advantage of?
I mean, you have to ask PG that question. I'm not too sure about that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
So there's Jack Jones, and you know I asked him that question at the end about JB, and I don't know if you noticed, but and I mentioned this multiple times to Ryan Hogan in the press box on Sunday. You know, I'm watching this. Jakorian Bennett's been their best corner all season, and I don't know what it was, and I'll ask Antonio Pierce today, but you know it's he didn't even go on the field for the first drive. You know, it was late in the first drive when he even got onto the field, and it looked like he was just going in nickel situations. So I don't know if that was something that they saw on film, that they thought he was more effective on, you know, third and long or whatever the case may be. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I really don't. And so that's why, you know, I asked Jack Jones, maybe there's, you know, something that he could allude to. And you heard what he said. I don't know. You got to ask, you know, PG. So, okay. So I'll ask AP today, right? I'll ask him, was there some kind of plan that went into it? Why was JB, who's been arguably their best corner, why was he not on the field more? That was something that kind of caught my eye, caught my attention, and really, you know, made me wonder what was going on. But there you hear a quick minute with Raiders cornerback Jack Jones. And then Nate Hobbs, real blessed to be able to catch up with him. He was actually on his way out, you know, but he didn't mind, because we have a pretty good relationship, didn't mind giving me a couple minutes. And I hate what happens in the locker room sometimes is you start talking to a guy and then everyone else will see you talking to him and then they'll go run over. And that's why you'll hear a lot of sound from the locker room and there's multiple guys there because multiple media members will come over. Well, and you'll hear it in a second, Nate Hobbs actually said, hey, I'm just doing his. Because, I asked him, I knew he was about to leave, but I always like to hear from Nate because he keeps it real. He lets it know what's going on. And so he was real cool to be able to give me a couple minutes, so I definitely appreciate that. But here's a couple minutes with Raiders nickel cornerback, who actually was on the outside more than JB was throughout the course of the game. Here's Nate Hobbs.
What seemed to happen, it seems like a lot of like a snowball effect. One bad thing led to another bad thing. Did you kind of get that feeling out there on the field?
Yes. Yeah. That is what happened, I suppose. One bad thing leads to another.
How do you stop that from happening? I know you're only one person, but how do you stop that as a team from having multiple bad plays happen like that?
Reset mentality is it's a mentality like life gonna happen. What you gonna do?
Right.
It's the only one I'm doing. I gotta go, y'all.
So as a team, how do you guys come? Like you said, you have to reset. So is that the message on the sideline? What is or is that in the huddle?
You got to be sideline, walking onto the field in the middle of the drive. You know what I'm saying? Lock in, and we kept telling ourselves that, but we can't get worn down as a team too. You know what I'm saying? Defensively, we can only speak for us, but as a team, we can't keep getting worn down like that either.
Right. Is that something that you guys talk about and work on in practice or anything, or is it just literally in the game when it's in the moment?
No, we train that way too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like defensively we answered a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And we answered a whole lot of times. And when you lose, that seems to get covered up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, we wasn't perfect. But, you know what I'm saying? When you lose, things seep through.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're going to be like, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. But it was a lot of good. It wasn't enough. So I'm not going to make no excuses.
Appreciate you.
So wanted to bring you all the sound from the players that I got to catch up with one-on-one. Like I said, we had, good 4 minutes at least with Max Crosby. Alexander Madison probably gave us a good 3 minutes. DJ Turner gave us, multiple minutes, almost 3 minutes. But those are the guys that I caught up with one-on-one. Amir Abdullah was fantastic as well. And maybe a little bit later on, maybe tomorrow's show, maybe we'll have a couple more sounds. But I definitely want to get back to calls and texts. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to let your voice be heard. And maybe you can give me your thoughts on what you think the Raiders need to do offensively. What should Antonio Pierce, as the head coach, what does he need to do with this team to get them jump-started? Is it as simple as what I was talking about in segment number 2, putting Getsy in the booth? Is it do they ultimately have to get rid of him? And if they do get rid of him, all right, what are they doing with the play calling? Does he get demoted? Someone else start calling the plays? Like, what do you think AP needs to do moving forward? And like I said, we'll definitely talk about the defense and where that still needs corrections as well throughout the course of the week as the Raiders get ready to take on the LA Rams at SoFi Stadium coming up next Sunday. So that's the conversation for another day. Again, we'll talk to Antonio Pierce. We'll see what he's got to say later on today and see if any changes are announced. We'll see. It might not happen until Wednesday, but we'll see what happens with what he has to say. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.